Apologies in advance. This is going to be pretty self-indulgent. If that's not your kind of thing, maybe try yesterday's video. It's much more entertaining than this, and maybe come back again tomorrow. But anyway, I am having a bad day. I do have bad days on a fairly regular basis, and they can be pretty debilitating sometimes. I've been depressed for as long as I can remember, and I've spoken before about it on this channel, but winter's always been the worst because, well, winter's the worst. It's cold, it's dark, it's dry, it's hard to go outside without feeling discomfort. And I'm a creature that runs on sunlight and humidity and beaches and those sorts of human bodily pleasures, and I don't do well with isolation. So this has been a difficult time for me. And I'm pretty sure it's a difficult time for a lot of other people too. I'm just so fucking sick of COVID. It's awful. Back in the last pandemic, back in the early 20th century, there was a pretty significant change to the way that people did culture back then. It was the middle of World War One, obviously, so that was happening. There was this new sense that the world was small enough that it could be considered all to be at war at the same time. But then also, all of the world is unified in this experience of this pandemic that was killing a significant number of people. And indeed, the 1918 pandemic of the flu was more deadly than COVID has been thus far. The nice thing about the current pandemic being that we have the practices in place to be able to control the spread, and we have a vaccine coming anytime now, so that's great. But there were some pretty significant long-term impacts on society after that pandemic happened. It took quite some time for people to feel comfortable being around one another again. Just having large groups of people unmasked, unprotected with one another, it was still somewhat nerve-wracking because, there could be another pandemic resurgence at any moment. And I think we're going to be stuck with this COVID thing for quite some time as well. Even though the vaccines seem to reduce or eliminate symptoms, they don't necessarily eliminate transmission or transmissibility at large. So we could be stuck in a situation where we have to do biological containment protocols basically indefinitely, which is lame. Before this whole thing started, I felt like I was starting to come out of my shell, starting to really become myself. I was, well, at the time flunking out of school because I was realizing just how disconnected I was with what I was doing at the time. The academic environment just wasn't really jiving with me, and my heart wasn't in it. I needed to be away from it. And I was starting to realize that, there is more to life than just that and just entertainment. And I was starting to develop a comfort for people. I've always been a bit of a loner, always been a bit of a recluse, and I still struggle with the idea of bodily contact. I feel really weird about physical contact with other people, like just casual touch, that sort of thing. I have the symptoms of mild autism, which I suspect to be a large factor in that, where it's all just very intense, and that makes it difficult to process without discomfort. But I was slowly starting to get out of that. I was slowly starting to feel, I don't know, like other people, maybe? But then this pandemic hits, and all of that progress just grinds to a halt. I am part of a group that does twice yearly murder mysteries, and those people really helped me come out of my shell a lot in just learning to, well, both in learning to act, that has been a great boon, but then also just the camaraderie, the closeness of that group of people. Like, theater really is a magical experience. But now, not having that twice weekly laugh-a-lot sessions, it's isolating. It's boring, it's lonely, it's disappointing. And I think the disappointment is just all-encompassing, our whole society. Which is why I think for a lot of people it's so tempting to just pretend that it's not happening. Because, yes, it sucks. I'll say COVID sucks. The pandemic restrictions, the lockdown, all this masking stuff. I hate doing it. I hate having to do it. I miss my friends. I miss my family. I miss just being out in the city and meeting people and hanging out with people and breathing heavily on them. But but I don't get to do that. And it would be just one thing to be like, well, no, I don't want I don't want this to be the case, therefore it's not the case. Therefore the pandemic is fake. Therefore I'm just going to go flaunting the mask rules. Therefore I'm just going to, go have a party, or as was the case in France, an 80-person orgy. I mean, that'd be fun right now. But if that were to happen, we'd all get COVID. And yes, this won't last forever. And I ought to maintain hope that this will be temporary. But it's difficult to remember that, especially when it's a dark and cold February night and you haven't really seen more than 2 or 3 people in the last week, and you want nothing other than just some human contact. I miss human contact. Never thought I'd feel that way as an introvert, as much of an introvert as I am. I just miss being around people, miss overhearing their conversations and having them in the room with me and, slightly irritating me even. I would not mind that. As the pandemic wore on, my mental health started to get really, really bad. I basically had to quit drinking because this is a near beer. Because I was just using it as an anesthetic, and it's not so great when you're just using it habitually as an anesthetic. You start to lose out on other parts of your life. And I mean, I wasn't binge drinking. It was only like 1 or 2 beers a day, but still, it was enough that I was definitely and unambiguously using it as a crutch, as an anesthetic, so that I don't have to feel the world the way it is. And there's no judgment in that. I'm not judging anybody who does live that way. That's perfectly fine. But I just feel like I'm wasting my life, wasting my time. And I don't want to do that. Starting to do these videos in the new year was pretty positive impact. I started waking up and feeling excited to live a new day, to I get to talk to a camera and people are actually going to listen to me on YouTube. And that was great for a while. And now it's stopped having that impact, or at least it doesn't have that impact quite so much. It's been taking longer and longer in the day before I actually get my ass to doing this thing. And I feel less and less enthusiastic about it each time I do it. And now entering my equation is like, should I even be doing this? Is this just me grandstanding? Am I just being an egomaniac? Is this just an anesthetic to keep me feeling good about myself, to stoke that ego? Ugh. I'm not looking for cheap reassurance here. I'm not looking for compliments. This isn't a fish for that sort of thing. I'm low on morale, and having a dark night of the soul. I hope it ends soon. I hope the pandemic ends soon. I hope I feel enthusiastic about stuff again. And I hope when the pandemic ends, it does spell a new phase for our culture. Because, yeah, it had gotten pretty bad before. Like, the options for sociality before the pandemic even were few and far between. You could go out to a bar with your pre-existing friends and hang out with them and drink alcohol and, mostly keep to yourself. And there are these unspoken social rules about not fraternizing with your neighbors or anything like that. And yeah, there are some other events that happen. There may be a games night or something like that, but it's very difficult for people my age to meet new people. I mostly hang out with the same dozen people, and I've had the same friends for a number of years. School has helped with that. Like, going back to school has let me meet a bunch of new people, and that's been really cool. But there's very few ways to be around people that don't involve buying something, i.e., buying an alcoholic beverage, or being involved in some sort of special interest. There's no just way to casually run into people. And that's what I miss about the pre-pandemic times, is that in the summer in the city that I live in, there's summer festivals every year. You can just go out into the park, no entry fee, nothing like that, and just hang out with people watching music or, you know, just wandering around a crowd. And it was one of the few ways to casually meet people in a large environment. But it even that doesn't work for most people. Because I like crowds. I am even as much of an introvert, even as much of a easily overwhelmed person as I am, I find a certain level of comfort in being overwhelmed by a crowd, and all of the other anxieties just kind of turn off. But there are a lot of people that can't handle that won't go into a crowd like that. So what are the options? Like, how do you casually meet new people? And yes, this is a place that the internet could take. This is a role that social media could connect people, but as we've seen, there is these siloing effects where groups of people end up in echo chambers with one another that have identical or near identical beliefs and worldviews, and it's difficult to bust out of those. There's got to be some other way, and I would like us to reclaim public space, because I feel like that's what's missing, is public space, the public sphere, the true public square where we can just be out in public and appreciate each other's company. If that opportunity were available right now, I would probably feel a lot better about myself right now. But at this point, I feel like I'm just shouting into the void. So, yeah, sorry, this was a bit of a whiny bitch fest. So I apologize, and thanks for sitting through it, if you even did. Anyway, I do these videos daily. Tomorrow will be a little bit less whiny and more topical, hopefully. So if you like the content or any other content, check out some of the other videos, because they're better than this one. So see you tomorrow.